Actually, I have another question about this. Since we are still talking about financial markets, which is something you're very good at. So I just mentioned to you before the start of this interview that I really enjoy this paper that you've written about the global financial crisis, because it's in the Journal of what was it again? Economic Perspectives.
Economic Perspectives. Yes.
Yeah, which is sort of a chronicling or like really describing in detail from day to day what happened during this massive meltdown of financial markets, basically. So it's really like, then this bank fell, and then that had these consequences, and that bank fell. Now, so people, please read that. That's a great paper. But my question is, do you think that financial markets today are still fragile, also compared to back then? But perhaps, they can also be fragile in a different way. What do you think about the state of financial markets?
So I think the financial markets are fairly self-stabilizing for small and interim shocks. But for large shocks, they are not they're very fragile and they're fall out of control. And that's when the government intervention is actually necessary. So people always think markets are, stabilizing themselves and all this, but I think it's only for small shocks. So for small shocks, you're shocked, and then people see this as a buying opportunity, then they push the price back up, and everything is stabilized. But for large shocks, the system is not stable, and it's very fragile. And for that, it's actually necessary that the government, which has additional taxing power and commitment power going way further into the future, is actually needed to stabilize the financial system. And of course, that itself creates problems. If you know then whenever there's a large shock, the government is bailing them out, or is creating a Fed put or whatever, that creates instability on it. So it creates instability. That's a very delicate balance to, on the one hand, you want to make sure that the system maintains its functioning. On the other hand, you don't want people anticipating that, and that makes actually the system unstable on its own.
Yeah, because someone in the chat also mentioned that debt is back at super high levels, both in the private and in the public sector, right? And then we have seen exactly that financial markets get bailed out and QE continues. So I think a lot of people are afraid that financial markets are again, not just fragile as they always are, which you say, which I agree with you, but more fragile than they always are.
That's correct. So essentially, one measure is the level of debt, and that's, as the audience member points out, we have very extreme high debt levels on the public sector, the private sector, and that makes the resilience space much smaller. So the feedback loops kick in much earlier, much more quickly. That's essentially makes the whole thing more fragile, and also then would ask for the public sector to come in. But at some point, if the public debt level is so high, then actually the official sector don't have the capacity anymore to bail out or to stabilize the system.